at this spot, so you probably won't be tempted to paddle out. But I do tend to request a room on the second floor of the hotel, as it gets you a little further away from scorpions. Let's see here. So here we are on the beach. It's just a beautiful stretch of empty beach. I recommend going down and visiting. It's so close to your hotel. And the other thing is, you start to get a little clue here from all these little specks on the beach, but there are just a ton of sand dollars on the beach here. And they make a really nice memento of your trip and legal to bring. So here are some tips on how to preserve your sand dollars. The sand dollars are pretty brittle, and so doing this set of preparation can help them sort of resist the minor dings and scratches and nicks that'll otherwise break a sand dollar. You will have to spend a lot of time washing the sand out. You can see that there's 2 holes on the oral side of the sand dollar here, and you're going to spend a lot of time running your sink water through these holes back and forth to rinse out all the sand, but it is worth it at the end. So the first day of driving here, when we're waking up in San Quintin and making our way to Guerrero Negro, is probably the most relaxed driving pace of the trip. So you don't need to get a super early start. You can take your time. You can have breakfast at the hotel, which I highly recommend. The OJ is fresh squeezed. You can, go take a walk on the beach in the morning if that's what you want to do, and you're in pretty good shape. This is also the best day if you're inclined to pull off the road and take pictures of the landscape or cactus or whatever. It is springtime, so the area will be more green at this point than it will be any other time of the year. And it's also, I've highlighted here, a little side trip to a place called La Lobera, which I'll get into a little bit more in a minute. This is actually the turnoff for La Lobera. Unfortunately, I took the picture facing the wrong way. I know I'm supposed to take the picture of me standing in front of the one sign with my hands in the air or something. So this is not going to help you recognize the place, but this is the turnoff to La Lobera. And this is the place itself. So it's kind of like a disc shape that's hollowed out under the rocks here. You can see that there's a channel that leads out to the ocean. And then this kind of interior chamber here that's open on the top. There's a viewing platform that you can look down into the chamber. And you can see back here, there's a good sized house. I think the house is abandoned, and maybe it's like a former fish camp or something. So this is the view. Oh, hold on. Inside the chamber, you can see maybe a couple dozen seals as they're washed up or as they're hanging out on the sand here. So they got a little rookery inside this protected chamber. So that's a very unusual bit of geography. And this video is taken looking down into the chamber. You can see we got a couple of little seals bobbing their heads around. We have, see this guy just floating along. If you think you recognize the voice here, you probably do. So that's the little octopus's garden here for the seals in La Lobera. This is a pretty quick trip. It's about 15 minutes each way, so it's not going to eat up too much of your time. The whole thing will take less than an hour to do. So I highly recommend that little excursion. So we're back on the highway here. This is what Central Baja looks like in the springtime. This is as pretty as it gets in terms of greenery. And now we're moving on to day 2. So let's see. One of my key recommendations for this trip is to book 2 tours on the water. The tours are 3 hours long or 4 hours long. They include 30 minutes of travel time each way. and you can book 2 of them in the same day if you don't come back. So the people who book the tours are not really used to people doing this, but the timing will work out and they will book it for you if you walk them through it. So, and this is a really good way to go. That way you'll do 2 of these tours on Saturday. You'll spend, almost 6 hours out on the water, which is really what we came down here for. And I highly recommend it. And there's really not much else to do in Guerrero Negro. So this is, in my opinion, this is the best way to go. This is a picture from my first trip down to the lagoons in 2000. A beautiful sunset. This is some areas of the lagoon, of course, are very picturesque. This picture is actually taken on the river that leads into the San Ignacio Lagoon, but it was just too pretty a picture to pass up, I thought. This is the lagoon in Guerrero Negro. This picture was not too pretty to pass up, but I put it in there anyway. But you can see that there's salt crust building up along the edge of the lagoon here in the backwater. Harvesting salt is a major industry, long-time industry in Guerrero Negro around the lagoons, and you can see why. There's a picture of an osprey who's got a fish hanging over a welcome sign by the side of the road. And of course, no shortage of gray whale bones and other miscellaneous marine artifacts in the area. This is pretty wild territory out here. This is an osprey chick in its nest, lots of plastic trash. We're gonna get to the whales right now. So that's a nice fluke, maybe 20 yards off the bow, maybe 15. A spy hopping whale right next to the boat. And this is a friendly cow-calf pair. You can see the cow here is in the foreground and the calf is behind. You can see obviously how much larger the mom is than the baby. And also that's the term that they use, friendlies, to describe the whales that seem to be actively seeking out interactions with boats and people. You're gonna meet a lot of friendlies out on the lagoon. That's a picture of an eye of the gray whale, and also a reminder to every once in a while wipe off your camera lens when you're taking pictures on the water. There's the double blowhole of Balanoptera at the boat side. It's somebody's hand right there. This is another whale showing off the pearly whites next to the boat. Another cow-calf pair. And you can see we're kind of getting blasted by the spray here. This is all very close quarters. And the spray is not stinky, it's not mucusy, it's not like you've been sneezed on by the whale. It's mostly ocean water. I've rarely detected any scent on it. But yes, we'll get to the touching already. So these are 2 people on the whale. There's a better than fair chance you'll be able to touch a whale, particularly if you do 2 tours. It is a nature trip, so obviously there's no guarantees, but either way, you're gonna get a lot of exposure to the whale. So this is me giving a face rub to a whale. Here's someone giving a kiss to the whale, big mom. The whales kind of feel like a yoga mat maybe, or a plastic, like full jug of milk. The adults do have a significant ectoparasite load, and the calves tend to be cleaner because they're freshly born, but you will see them starting to pick up barnacles and other stuff around their mouths and snout from the nursing. So I'm going to see video number 2 here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the mouth's open. Thank you, baby. Yeah, baby. Are you coming back?
So you can see this whale was visiting everybody on the boat, giving everybody a fair chance at it. And a fair warning about filming, of course. It is very exciting to be on the boat when an animal twice the size of the boat is right next to you and rubbing up against you. So just fair, to expect that your commentary is going to be a little boring to you after you show the video for the 20th time, because it all seems kind of self-evident in hindsight. So I want to take a sec here to talk about the legality and the ethics of this sort of interaction between people and nature. I get asked about it a lot, so I'm just going to briefly run through the facts, my observations, and my perspective. It's not my purpose here to pick any arguments with anybody who sees it any differently, and I'm not trying to convince anybody. I do think it's a completely valid topic for people to discuss, and reasonable people can certainly differ. I just wanted to present basically the matter as I see it. So in the US, we have the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's a crime to undertake any activity that causes a marine mammal to alter its behavior. In Mexico, they have different laws. And that is not that they have no laws or that there's no enforcement or that anything goes. For example, you're not allowed to jump into the water with the whales, which, believe me, is extremely tempting, which is something that theoretically you could do in the US, but is specifically prohibited in Mexico. And both the Ojo de Liebre Lagoon and Laguna San Ignacio are biological reserves that are overseen by the Mexican federal government. The tours are authorized concessions within the reserves. They're required to obey certain regulations, and the penalty for violating those regulations can include losing the concession. And these concessions, I believe, are very valuable. I think these people are making, certainly by local standards, very good livings on doing this sort of activity. So they're very protective of it. One of the things is the tour boats can't just stop wherever they find a whale. On the lagoon, there is a designated viewing area, which is a geographically bounded area within the waters where stopping to view or interact with the whales is legal. Outside that viewing area, the boats are not allowed to stop. They're only allowed to travel. The boats carry a transponder with them that allows them to be tracked. The number of boats within the viewing area at one time is also limited, and the boats are only allowed to spend a certain amount of time per tour in the area, and the boats are limited to the number of passengers they're allowed to bring. So the viewing areas are also closed to tourism outside of pretty limited hours. The captains are trained, and each tour has to have a licensed naturalist who speaks English and Spanish and who gives a presentation to the passengers explaining some basics of whale anatomy, the laws that are applicable in Mexico, and just basics about proper conduct. In my experience, everybody's been very respectful. The proper conduct thing includes things like not touching the eyes, the blowhole, the mouth, the fins, or the tail. Those are areas that are thought to be sensitive. Not being too rough, but the naturalists will explain all of this to you. It's all pretty straightforward. So is it a perfect system? It is not. But I've been on probably 20 of these tours on the lagoons. And in my observation, the system does work as it's intended to. I've never seen anything from the operators, the boats, the crew, or the passengers that I felt in any way threatened the well-being of the whales. I want to, also say that I personally support the Marine Mammal Protection Act, both in letter and in spirit. That said, it's also not a perfect law. So I want to talk about some of the imperfections of what's going on down here. So the lagoons are pretty extensive and the viewing areas are limited to a relatively small portion of the lagoon. But those portions are placed in areas where the whales were already known to frequent. And so they put it where the whales already like to be. So there's a little bit of double duty in the area. It's understandable, but it's a consideration. The whales are free to come and go as they please, and they seem to do so, but we really don't have any way of knowing how or if the whales understand what a viewing area is, that there are areas where the boats will interact with them and won't. There's just really no way to get to the bottom of that. My guess is that these lagoons at any given time could hold up to 2,000 whales, and there's maybe 100, maybe a little bit more within the viewing area. So that's a lot of whales inside the viewing area. There's really no temptation to go outside of the viewing area. The viewing areas provide ample opportunity. At any given time, there's probably 6 to 8 whales within a stone's throw distance of the ponga. The Capitan may, sort of slowly cruise over to a nearby whale. They may encourage you to splash the whale or sing or clap, but beyond that, not too much. And the other whales are off doing whatever gray whales do when we're not around. So the other thing is the viewing areas are placed at the mouth of the lagoon. So any whale that wants to enter or exit the lagoon has to traverse the viewing area. But the viewing areas really are pretty small. And so my impression is that if a whale just wanted to power through, it would get across in just a couple of minutes. I can also tell you that on my first trip down to take a tour was the first time that I'd ever been on a whale watch tour where the captain did not even react or comment at all at the first whale sighting of the day. It's every whale tour, the first whale that you see of the day, the captain comes over and says, oh, well, there goes your, refund or whatever. When they are not in the viewing area, these guys are powering across. They want to get to the viewing area as quickly as possible. They're not trying to stop to look at the whales. I've been on tours where the whales are 100 yards away and jumping 6, 7 times. And we did not stop. We did not change course. We went to the viewing area and returned from the viewing area. So that's been my experience out there. The operators take the rules very seriously. And then we can talk about the ethics. I think the central question here is whether this interaction with the boats and people causes the whales to develop a friendliness or becoming acclimated to people in a way that may be dangerous for them outside of the circumstances of this area. So of course that's true. I mean, it can't help but be true to some extent. But the longer answer really is that there's really no evidence that outside of the lagoons that they engage in any similar behaviors. When they're migrating, they're swimming, they're not stopping, they're not trying to have interactions. I've been on probably 100 whale watches out of Southern California. I'm sure most of you guys have been on plenty of whale watches as well. You just don't see this sort of behavior. Even if you went out on your own boat and fully intended to dispense with the Marine Mammal Protection Act and do whatever you liked, you just couldn't have the sort of interaction with these whales in that setting that is available constantly down in the lagoons. So it's just, it's very situational. Another thing that I would point out is that, it's always possible, of course, that a propeller could strike a whale, but really the danger to the life of the whale seems to come from a real ship strike. And, those ship strikes that are real dangerous like that tend to come from gigantic cargo vessels, Navy ships, very, very large vessels. The boats that we're out on the lagoons are, 22-foot skiffs. They got a 150 horse outboard engine. It's just day and night. There's really no comparison, in my opinion. Another thing is, a few years back, our chapter here of ACS hosted a NOAA researcher who specialized in gray whales. He was based out of the Arctic. He'd spent 25 years on the water in the Arctic doing research on gray whales. But at the time that he came and gave his talk to our group was just on the tail of his first time ever going down to the lagoons and visiting himself. And he just made it abundantly clear that he had never seen the whales do anything like what they were doing down in lagoons. He basically said, I don't even recognize these whales, even though literally he recognized the individual whales. He knows them and photo catalogs them up in the Arctic waters. And so that was just additional confirmation for me that even on the sort of small boat research that's happening in the Arctic, the whales that are friendly down in Mexico do not approach even small craft in the Arctic or along the migratory route. So I guess what I'm getting at is that, you know, the behavior that you see down there in Mexico would be illegal if it could happen in the US under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. But I just think that that scenario down there doesn't fit well into the setup that we're used to thinking of when we think of things that are prohibited and protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So I don't think that it'll be a big reveal at this point to have me admit that I personally think that what's going on down there is largely okay. My background is in ecology and evolutionary biology, so I tend to bring a population or ecosystem perspective to the question. I definitely know that there are people out there that are very pure on their no interaction perspective, and I can respect that. I just think that in this case, it's pretty conservative. This is a pretty low harm setup. There's really 1,000 different things that people are doing in the oceans that are, you know, devastating and very damaging. And so on the long list there, my opinion is that this falls pretty far down the line. The other thing that's worth noting is that, as I pointed out earlier, these people are making a good living and they are attempting to be protective of what they have. You know, a few miles up the road in San Felipe, pretty similarly situated guys on pongas are extincting the vaquita porpoise. If people here did not see value in what they're doing with the whales, they could easily expand the salt works in the area, which would be more coastal development and more shipping traffic. A lot of fishermen in this area, it's very well known for shark finning. These people may resort to that. So I do also believe in harm reduction, and I do think that it's worth just contemplating as you think about what's going on down there, that there, again, are much worse things that could happen. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox. This is a picture of a dead whale that washed ashore. During this year, NOAA had declared an unusual mortality event. I think this day out on the lagoons, we saw 6 dead whales. I think that was relating to undernourishment in these animals, but you can see it was clearly a bounty for the seagulls and the coyotes. This picture is a little hard to make out. What's going on here is this is a row of about 15 or 20 gray whales that are all surfing a standing wave. There's a sandbar right here that's off to the left side of my screen. And there's a tidal change that's created a current that's eroding the sandbar. And so the whales are surfing this standing wave as it comes off from the sandbar. And as it's coming off from the sandbar and eroding the sandbar, things that are living in the sand are being unhoused. And these whales are eating the little things that are coming out from the sand as the sandbar is getting eroded. So that was a pretty neat setup. I had never really seen anything quite like that. It's just part of the just really amazing and unique things that you can see going on down here. This is a blue cannonball jellyfish. On this trip, when we got out onto the lagoon, we could see into the water that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of these black jellyfish in the water. And nobody wanted to put their hands in to try and touch the whale. There were so many of these jellyfish, we were afraid of getting stung. And the Capitan assured us that these jellyfish didn't sting, but I can't say that we really believed him. And so he grabbed a little hand net and dipped over the side and scooped one of these out, and then sort of tilted the net over to me and said, "Grab it." So I figured this guy was either telling the truth or willing to risk his tip for a pretty quick laugh here. So I reached in and grabbed it, and this is what was inside. This just incredibly beautiful, deep, deep blue jellyfish. Spoiler alert, it did not sting me. So just beautiful. we got the split screen here. On the left, we've got a big mooring buoy that's covered with sea lions. It was pretty fun. This thing is pretty tall here. This is probably 6 foot out of the water at least. And it was fun to watch the sea lions push each other off the thing and also try to, use the momentum of the surge to get up and on. It was pretty athletic of them. And then on the right, we got past an outgoing barge that's uncovered and covered with the refined salt. The salt that's being produced here, my understanding is that it goes off to places where it's turned into hydrochloric acid for other industrial purposes. So after you get off the tour, you got to make some miles up to the town of Catavenia. If you do it real quick, you'll get there in time to see a sunset like this, maybe. And if you get up there really quick, you can watch the sun go down with a pina colada in your hand. I encourage both of those. If you want to stay at this hotel, it's a good idea to make a reservation. It is the only place to stay for almost 200 miles along this stretch. Otherwise, you're going to have to be getting friendly with the guy who farms coconuts across the highway there. This is another member of the ACS board posing in front of a cactus and some art. Yes. And then this is the real day of driving, is on the way back from Catavenia. So day 3 on Sunday. This is a very long drive. There's not going to be time for stopping. Google says it's going to take you 7.5 hours. You should really plan for 10. And if you don't have Century, maybe even 14. Although I will say that my understanding is that they have completed a new stretch of road repair down a little bit to the southeast of here that may actually allow for a quicker trip. So I haven't done it since the pandemic has lifted, but it is possible that an alternative route home could be, instead of staying in Catavenia, that you head for Puertecito, San Felipe, someplace else, Gonzaga Bay, and stay along there and maybe have a slightly shorter ride on the way back. Who knows? This is one of the reasons why Google is unsuccessful at estimating your drive times. This is the federales entering our vehicle at a checkpoint. It's a little nerve-wracking, but generally a pretty harmless scenario. But it will take a little bit of time if they decide that they want to search underneath all your seat cushions. And then just a reminder that this is a guy who isn't trying to make the trip in 3 days. And that there's a lot more to enjoy down in Baja if you take your time. So obviously for folks that are comfortable down there, I don't have to explain it to you. You'll have more fun if you go slower, and then you won't have to worry about all this get in by the fall of by sunset, or worry too much about your gas tank and everything. But anyway, that's a broad outline for how to do the 1,000-mile round trip to the lagoons. It can be done on a 3-day weekend, and you'll have a great time. That's what I got.
Thank you, George, very much. And for everybody that's on, I just want to thank George profusely, because he stepped up. Our scheduled speaker took off to do research in Peru, and George said he had a program, and he did not disappoint. You did a good job on that, George. Excellent. Leanne, do you want me to field questions? Okay, I'll field questions, and then we're going to go to Leanne to do a little. Yeah, we'll go to. So, what are the names of the hotels that you stayed at? This is from the chat room, and then we'll just open it up for people to ask their questions as well. So, what are the names of the hotels that you stayed at?
So the hotel that I stay at in San Quintin, it's a little bit outside of town. It's at a place called Rancho Los Pinos. It's formerly a La Pinta. It's out on the shore. It's called the Misión Santa Maria. And like I said, by Baja standards, it's an extremely beautiful hotel. And you just cannot beat the location. and by Baja standards, it's extremely expensive. You would have difficulty finding a hotel this pricey anywhere outside of a resort area. But ultimately it's $80, which I don't know if you can get a hotel in San Diego County for $80 at this point. So everything is relative. The second night, when you stay in town in Guerrero Negro, there tend to be more options. Guerrero Negro is a bit of a town. They've got the industry there with the salt works. So there's a variety of hotels to choose from. There's a newish hotel called the Caracol, which means the snail, or possibly the sea snail. That seems to be a pretty nice one. I've stayed in Malarimo. That's a nice one. But these are much more prosaic hotels. Guerrero Negro's tourism industry involves the whales and also business visitors relating to the salt operations. So, but there's more places to stay. You probably wouldn't have to book that far in advance, especially if you are on the outer edge rather than right in the middle of the season. But of course, it can never hurt to book your hotels. So, no particular preference in town there. And then, like I said, in Cataveña on the way back, there is only one hotel. It also was formerly a La Pinta. It's a beautiful hotel. Yeah, so that's where I stay when I'm doing the 3-day trip. But again, if you're not on that sort of a schedule, you just open up the possibilities are endless.
And then are you booking right there in Guerrero Negro? Do you have captains that you work with particularly? Are there certain people we'd want to maybe address, or how once we get to Guerrero Negro do we get onto the lagoon?
Yeah, so it's again probably a good idea. Most of the tours are associated with hotels. So once you check in, you can talk to the person at your front desk about their tour operator. There are a couple of other hotels on the main drag. There's really only one main street through Guerrero Negro. And the hotels that I've been staying at are kind of closer to the highway rather than further down that street. And so there's a few of them in a row. You can go check them out. They're all pretty similar. I've been, I think, on 2 or 3 different operators in town. At some point, I could map out where they dock and everything like that, so that you would have a better idea about how long your boat ride was going to be, because I don't think they share docks. But yeah, just when you book your hotel, let them know that you're interested in doing the tours. They may even ask you. And if you haven't booked your hotel and you're just pulling into town, you'll probably be able. I've never had trouble booking a tour.
Are there airport options? Can people fly to Guerrero Negro?
It's very difficult to fly to Guerrero Negro. There is, I understand, a opportunity to book from essentially a charter operation out of Ensenada, so that you could drive down to Ensenada and then book a charter plane trip that would fly out to Guerrero Negro eventually. There's an airstrip outside of town that's maybe 10-15 minutes outside of town. But really the advantages of that would not be very much. You would find yourself in town without a car, without the ability to drive yourself around, and you'd still have to take your car into Mexico. So you're still talking about you're getting all the visas at Tijuana. You're still having to get Mexican auto insurance. You're packed up all of your things into the car, and then you're going to repack it into the airplane and then unpack it and call a taxi. I'm not saying that you wouldn't perhaps save a little time, but the amount of time that you would save from that approach and the extra cost, the only way that I would do it is because I wanted to do it that way and experience the plane ride. Just for the purpose of making the logistics of the trip easier, I don't think it will help much.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, and then somebody is saying to ask you about outfitters or camping setups along the shore. I mean, if we wanted to rough it, are there possibilities to do that?
So there are not at Guerrero Negro, and the reason for that is that most of the shore area there is controlled by the salt works. And so the salt works allows the tour groups to pass and allows them to have their docks, in the spots that they do. but they don't allow people to just show up in cars and wave at the gate and get through. There are several layers of security gates that you'd have to get through to get access to the area. And then plus you'd have to find your own boat or other way to get to the docks. Now, if you went down to San Ignacio Lagoon will allow people to stay. They will allow you to camp, and that's a really good option. I've stayed down there. It can definitely be enjoyable and a good experience.
Well, very good, very good. Somebody came in late, so say again, what's the best time of year according to you? You did tell us, but he joined late.
So the range of the peak season tends to be February and March and slightly into early April. But my advice for what I presented here was that, really tight 3-day trip. I prefer to do that towards the end. Like I said, you get better weather. The tours are very smooth at that point. The operators have been doing this on a daily basis for several months. They get to know the whales, and it's just a very good operation at that point. If you go earlier and certainly more central to the middle of the season, you will get more crowds in the hotels. So you'll have to book further out in order to get in the main heart of the season.
And our good buddy Troy, one of our members and a real supporter, said that he went this year and the new highway is open and it's awesome. Cut 2 hours off and was nicer than any road in the US. So there's
that's what I've heard. I've heard very good things about that stretch. It used to be a very difficult stretch up from the break at Chapala. It was the sort of thing that was a 25-mile stretch of road that was known to take you, an hour and a half or 2 hours to get across. But apparently it is much improved, and I'm looking forward to driving it myself.
And then just for everybody, if you would look in the chat room, both Carrie, who's gone with George, but she has put in mariotours.com, and Leanne put in bajadaytripper.com. If you feel more comfortable going with an organization on this side of the road, of the border.
So Mario Tours is booking when you're down there. That's for the whale.
Sorry. Thank you, Carrie, for jumping in. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that, I think another thing that people here find a little off-putting is that, if you were to go through a guided tour with one of our local institutions, who I won't call out by name, but those trips can be pretty expensive. And honestly, they're not that expensive, but there is a bit of a price tag. And if you're willing to take your own vehicle down there, you'll cut a lot off the price. The trip that I outlined here, you would have trouble spending $500 on this trip. And honestly, if you do something clever with sharing hotel rooms and carpooling, it could be far less than that. This is a very budget trip, even when you're staying at some of the nicest hotels on the peninsula.
Very good. Now, go ahead, Leanne, go ahead.
The Baja Day Tripper, that guy put together, I did one that was on the road and one where we flew from Encinitas to Guerrero Negro and then drove from Guerrero Negro to the other lagoon.
San Ignacio.
San Ignacio. And I thought it was phenomenal because I loved seeing the coastline of the Baja land and water. So that was incredible. But he did a great job and he put it all together before we got there, picked us up in San Diego and then drove us all the way there.
Yeah, I would underscore that. Don't underestimate the beauty of the Vizcaíno Desert on the trip. The whales are the main event, but this time of year is sort of springtime in Baja, and it's pretty awesome. So very good. Now let's just go ahead, George.
One other thing that I kind of failed to emphasize that I wanted to was that on that first day of driving, when you're leaving San Quintin, about 45 minutes or an hour south of San Quintin is a town called El Rosario. El Rosario is basically the last time you'll see the Pacific Ocean until you get all the way down to Guerrero Negro. The other thing that it's the last time you'll see is a Pemex station. And so you really, really, really have to fill up your gas tank in El Rosario. I know your gas tank looks really full because you probably filled it up in San Quintin too. But you know, if it's been a while since you've had range anxiety, you do not want to have range anxiety in central Baja. It is an extremely deserted place. You will not enjoy the last 50 miles of your trip if you're sitting there and staring at your, you know, gas gauge. So really, it's a 180-mile stretch with no gas, and there's really no guarantee on either side that any of those gas stations will have gas. So keep your gas tank full, fill when you can.
And I guess that precludes my electric vehicle, huh?
Yeah, that'll be a future installment. You know, next time I think I give this talk to the group, we'll focus on how to do it using the public bus system in Mexico.
There you go.
I've done that
Yeah, I
trip
know
a couple
you've
of
done that
times.
one.
It
That's good, yeah.
it absolutely can be done, and pretty easily, but that's for another day.
Yeah, that will be good. I look forward to that as well, because I know I've heard your adventures for that. Would anybody like to ask George a question? Just kind of unmute yourself and jump in here. I'm kind of being the moderator here. I don't see anything more in the chat room. I know Leanne. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
Yes, hi. So I am actually just about to start my master's project on the friendly behavior of the gray whales down in the lagoons. So I have a couple of questions, and I won't drag it on too long. One is, so you mentioned this is under $500 because I want to go down there to do research. Do you have any other tips besides, like, I can camp in San Ignacio? Any other tips for doing this like as inexpensively as possible?
College student trip.
Yeah, master student.
Yeah. So you can take the buses from Tijuana to Guerrero Negro. You cannot really take the bus to San Ignacio. So you can take the bus to the town of San Ignacio, but so when I last took the bus, I wanted to go to the lagoon in San Ignacio. So I took the bus to San Ignacio, and when I got out there, it turned out to be very difficult to get a ride to the lagoons. It's about a 45-minute drive. It used to be a dirt road. It's now paved almost all the way to the end now, but you'd have to basically hitchhike or pick up a ride with somebody in town, which can be done. It's just not very reliable. So if you don't have a tight schedule, that's a cheaper way to go. But if you are on, you know, a limited time frame, you're better off, you know, driving if that's what you're looking for. The other thing is, if you can find, like I said, a few people to carpool with you and split some of the fixed costs of the gasoline, the car trip is going to be pretty cheap. The gas is your, you know, major expense. You can certainly stay in cheaper hotels than the ones that I have suggested. Quite a bit cheaper, especially in San Quintin. In San Quintin, you know, you could easily stay in a perfectly serviceable hotel for $30.
And Anna, are you, go ahead, Anna, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to see if there were hotels that were potentially free of scorpions.
Everybody's hotel is free of scorpions, of course. I haven't seen a scorpion in any of these hotels in years.
Like
You know,
like second stories, like
yeah. So the second story, particularly closer to the beach, you know, most of the hotels are pretty diligent about a defensive perimeter of insecticide that you'll see them out there with the backpack on, spraying on a regular basis. I really haven't seen a lot of problems with scorpions, but you know, it bothers me too. I'm a bit of an arachnophobe myself, so I shake out the sheets, and you know, it's 5 minutes. Out camping and out in the, you know, rustic area, like the little, they've got little like plywood huts that you can stay in out on San Ignacio.
Okay.
Those, by all accounts, are filled with scorpions. So
You want
that
to get a portable black light because they glow. You know, Anna, you probably know that scorpions glow.
Anna,
so.
I recommend against the portable black light. You are not going to see any information that you're going to want to get with the portable black light. If you want to get any sleep at all, leave the portable black light at home.
Ignorance is bliss, yeah.
Yeah. So another possibility is, so I have a pickup truck, and so when I'm going camping down in Mexico, I can, you know, set up on an inflatable mattress in the back of my pickup truck. That is very protected from insects and snakes both. So
Yeah.
Anna, are you aware of the ongoing research project based in San Ignacio where it's a US Mexican? I would urge you to see about trying to hook up with those folks because they're all set up.
Yeah, I just actually got Steven Swartz's book, and I'm gonna contact him. I'm still in the early stages.
You didn't buy it through us. I'm a little ashamed about that. You know, we
Oh
sell
gosh,
these
I'm
books.
sorry. I
No,
bought it.
I'm just trying to make you feel bad.
Oh, what have I done?
Well, we haven't been able to sell it since we haven't shown up in person for a year and a half. So you're off the hook. You're
Okay,
good- you're in good shape.
He's on Instagram too, Anna.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last time I did the
Schwartz
bus, it cost me, I want to say, a little under $100 to get the 500 miles from Tijuana to San Ignacio. If I wanted to get a ride from the town to the lagoon, it was going to cost me another $100 to do that last 30 miles or something like that, which was pretty staggering. Like I said, you can meet people in town that'd be happy to give you a ride, but if you're on a timetable, that's not as easy. And so what I ended up doing actually was hopping on the return bus and just going back to Guerrero Negro and doing it from there. Because Guerrero Negro, you can navigate the whole circumstance there on foot in a way that, like I said, is much more difficult in San Ignacio because the town is so distant from the lagoons, and they presume that you're going to set up the whole thing together, and that may not be what you're doing.
Got it. All right. Well, yes, that's all the questions that I will keep you with. All right. Thank you so much for the
Well,
information.
you've got a good contact, Anna, through our chapter. So you can send it to our email and we'll make sure it gets to George. Also, Kay London has put in Roadside Geology of Baja California with some information about that book in the chat room. So if anybody's driving, that would be a fun thing to have along. And then
Definitely a good book.
Carla says, have you ever traveled with someone without a passport? If so, any problems at checkpoints?
Well, you'll have a problem at the last checkpoint, getting back into the US. But in Mexico, I think they do want to take a look at your passport before issuing a tourist visa. Oh, Canadian passport? I don't think that there will be any trouble. I should be more circumspect about that. I have not traveled with anybody who was using a Canadian passport. What I will say is, if you are traveling in Baja, you will meet plenty of Canadians down there. They seem to be able to get it done.
And I would say that from my own personal experience, having traveled with somebody with a Canadian passport, we only ran into a problem back at the border where we got into secondary inspection just because they had a Canadian passport versus a US. So it was like a double border jump. So it was interesting. Any other questions anybody would like to ask? We've got the man. Anything else well, that was George. Way to pull that out, buddy. You told us a week ago that you were ready to go and you did not disappoint. That was excellent. I'm sorry, I just forgot to get the recording started right away. So we missed a little bit off the front end of yours. Leanne, you want to say something about volunteers?
Yes, I was gonna just, there are actually two things. Next month, we have Davin Haffey, who's gonna talk about salmon in the Northwest. But then I also wanted to put out there that the Natural History Museum is recruiting whalers, and you can contact Kaylin Waysprott, and I've got her, I'm gonna type her
Email.
her email
Here
here.
comes the friendly whale on the way in here. Look at that cute little baby. Go ahead, keep going. Now try to continue the meeting.
Okay, so it's the Natural History Museum is recruiting whalers, and whalers go out on the hornblower and help talk about the whales and spot the whales and give everybody information. Kaylin's information, her email is KAYLYNS@gmail.com, or you can call her at 619-987-3300. And they do about 2.5, 3 months of training. And then I believe their season starts in December. So the
Very good.
training will probably start around September.
Thank you. And
Thank
then,
you.
thank you very much. And then Carrie, as far as Earth Day, that's been officially canceled, right, Carrie? And so we don't need volunteers this year?
That's right, but Scripps might be interested in letting us table, and that's a really nice place. So if people are wanting to get out there and talk about cetaceans with the public, we'd love to have you on a list that we could contact you about when things come up as we start opening up.
And so actually, if anybody wants to volunteer or contact George, I'm going to put the chapter email in the chat room if you want to contact us directly. And I will make sure that gets forwarded to the appropriate person. So Carrie does the volunteers. George was our speaker tonight. So if you have other questions for George, we'll make sure. So if you want to volunteer, send it to that email and I'll make sure Carrie gets it. And if you want to ask George any offline questions, that's available as well. One last go around. Anybody else?
George, are we going next year?
I'm always
With
down.
Bambino? With the Bambino?
I don't know about that. We'll see if he gets all of his shots.
Well, Anna will be all set up and by that time she'll be waiting for us and she'll be such an expert that she'll guide us around. So good luck on your research project, Anna.
Thank you. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I'll have a whole campsite set up, all
Nice.
slightly raised from the ground. And I can host everyone. It'll be a good grand old time.
All right,
Nice.
all right. We're recording this, so we're going to hold you to that. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions of George? Everybody, thank you very, very much for joining us for
Thank
this
you.
month's meeting. Remember, we're the second Wednesday next month on salmon and the impact of what that means to the marine mammals. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.